Welcome to Redundancy Matters with me, June Hogan. I'm a qualified career coach and outplacement specialist, and I've got a background in HR. And this is the podcast where I help HR professionals and leaders managing redundancies to put people at the heart of the process. In today's episode, I'm joined by Niki Corbishley, founder of New Coaching, and a HR leader with over 20 years' experience, including transformation and change and large collective consultations. Niki shares her insights on what it really means to put people at the heart of a redundancy process. We talk about how to balance structure with compassion in collective consultations, how to prepare and support line managers through emotionally charged conversations, and how authentic communication is essential to build trust in the most challenging of times. So whether you're a HR professional managing a collective consultation or a leader supporting your team through change, this episode offers some practical insights to help you lead the process. And if you want to go deeper into managing redundancies, you'll find the link in the show notes to register for a free monthly lunch and learn session where my colleague and redundancy expert Robin and I explore different aspects of managing redundancies. And you'll also find lots of resources on my website, wildwoodcoaching.co.uk. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to today's episode of Redundancy Matters, and I'm delighted to be joined by Niki Corbishley from New Coaching. It's lovely to have you here, Niki, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your insights from your 20 years in HR, and specifically around managing redundancies and making sure people are always at the heart of the process. So yeah, thanks so much for joining me. And do you just want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, June. So I am absolutely delighted to be here and share my experiences on redundancies. And as you said, through the experiences that I've had over those 20 years in senior HR roles, one thing that I've learned, whilst process matters in redundancy, what really makes the difference is putting the people at the heart of that process and leading those consultations and the process with empathy, authenticity, and clarity. I worked my way up through the HR career ladder and got to head of HR and decided 3.5 years ago that it was time to do something different after leading through the pandemic and setting up my own freelance consultancy. Initially started as New HR, delivering HR services to SMEs. I then realised that what really lights me up is more strategic project management work, and spent a couple of years, last 2 years, doing transformation work with large organisations, which included a number of collective consultations as well through redundancy. And then on the back of that, I fell in love with coaching, did my coaching accreditation, and have now launched New Coaching, which is my passion.
Wonderful. So yeah, it's great to hear that journey and that story. And as you said, the recent experience that you've got of that transformation and change and managing those collective consultations. So I always ask guests, why does redundancy matter to you?
Sadly, redundancy is part of our working world, especially these days in these uncertain, tough economic times. And I guess, like many people, I don't actually enjoy taking people through a redundancy consultation process. However, I do think to myself, if it's going to happen anyway, then at least I can ensure that it's done with empathy and compassion. And I can ensure that those people that are at risk and facing redundancy feel respected, feel supported, and have the best experience they can have in a difficult experience.
Yeah, as you say that, it's a fact of most people's careers. Redundancy is more and more common now. 20 or 30 years ago, there was lots of jobs for life and you joined a company and redundancy wasn't commonplace at all. And certainly when I experienced it for the first time in my early career, there was a huge amount of shame attached to it. I was thinking, why me? Because it literally didn't happen and it was difficult to talk about it. Now it's more commonplace, as you say, and if it's going to happen, then making sure that someone like yourself and other of the HR professionals out there who really want to put people at the heart of the process are there taking people through it, because it's inevitable, and making sure that, yeah, it's delivered with authenticity and that compassion. So with collective consultation, clearly it's often more complicated because there's more moving parts, there's the process to follow, as you say. But how do you make sure that you're putting people above the process when you're managing those sorts of collective consultations?
Taking a step back and thinking of the human behind the process. And that human extends to the people leading the process, as well as those impacted by being at risk of redundancy, and also those that aren't, but are work colleagues with those people at risk. And that starts for me with the leadership team. And they will have been navigating this redundancy process for a lot longer before the news comes out. They will have lived with it, they'll have worked through the process, but they still need to navigate those difficult discussions. They still need to be able to get on and have those conversations with their team. So it starts with thinking about them and where they're coming from in terms of how difficult it is for them, and then also helping them to see what impact it's going to have on their people, and recognizing that they might have had this news in their to-do list for a while, but it's brand new news to the people that they're announcing it to.
That's often lost in some ways, isn't it, in that communication? Because by the time you get to the announcement, as you say, this has been ongoing, in some cases, weeks, maybe even months, depending on the size and the scale of it. But remembering that's the first time someone's going to hear that news. And how do you help managers, I guess, position that and help them to remember and articulate that in the right way for people?
Having the conversation and doing that through a training framework normally. So rather than just focusing on training for the redundancy consultation process, and these are the conversations, this is what you'll have to do, here's your templates for your discussions, this is how you remain compliant in the law. It's then bringing the human element into that and talking about that whole change management process, the change curve, all the emotions that go through that change curve, and how to handle those as managers. So they'll be feeling nervous anyway. They'll likely not be relishing the opportunity to go and talk to their team about this. So it's giving them the confidence to deal with that difficult conversation, and also to understand and handle those emotions, and know that it's not about them if someone wants to take it out on them that they've received this bad news or something.
Yeah, that's almost the detachment, but still being invested in it. As you said, it's bigger than you as a line manager. This is about the organization. It's about circumstances. It's about roles, not people. And inevitably, people will have that range of emotions. And it might be that the manager, who's the person sitting in front of them, is the person that they understandably want to take it out on. So that sounds really valuable in terms of helping them prepare for emotion and prepare for what that might look like and how they might deal with it, because it can be emotionally draining for line managers and HR professionals. So it sounds like the training that you put in place at the start helps them to understand how to manage some of that. And would you also do things on an ongoing basis to check in with line managers and just to check how things are going and to check how they are doing themselves?
Yeah, definitely. Almost like holding their hand through the process, really, and being there to check in with them, talk about what's happened in the conversations that they've been having, giving feedback as well if you're going into collective consultation, having those discussions on an ongoing basis, to also from both sides really, and start to hear what might be happening, what they might be hearing and seeing on the shop floor that people might not be bringing into the consultation meetings. So you can get a real sense of that employee sentiment and where they're at and how they're feeling, which helps you to then navigate the further conversations as well, and get a sense of where people are at psychologically through the process.
Mm. And that visibility, as you say, from line managers being visible and getting that temperature check, and also from the HR team's perspective, making sure that they're visible with the line managers. And as you say, walking the floor, being out there and being available to answer questions and just be there for people. I think it's that kind of time in an organization is hugely important to be visible. I know it depends on how people work, the dynamics, working from home, etc. But where there is an opportunity to be with people, I think that makes a big difference, particularly in an uncertain time.
And also giving confidence to the managers that it's okay to reach out to someone and have a chat outside of the process. I think a lot of people can get quite scared that they might do something wrong during a process. And it's reminding them that they're still their line manager. They're still there to support them and to check in on their well-being. And at the end of the day, this person's going through a big, significant impact in their career, managing that, but they've also still got a job to do. And a lot of them will still be coming to work every day, showing up and having those conversations. So it's giving the line managers the confidence to be able to bring discussions in about how they might be feeling as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you mentioned about preparing the leadership team and having that kind of that training and giving them more than just the process. So when you're in that sort of training session, what are some of the key elements that you want to make sure that you cover to support line managers and really prepare them for what they've got to deliver?
Giving them confidence in the process so they don't have that worry and that concern about stepping outside of the process or doing something wrong. Handle objections, how to deal with feedback, and also how to handle emotions and what might be coming up from their team when they're talking to them, with either in consultation or outside of consultation. But also to focus on the leadership team and their emotions and what they might be going through. They're humans too. And delivering this news isn't going to be easy. And they would have worked with these people in their team. They'll have been nurturing them, building them up. And also, it's highly likely that their roles would be impacted in a big consultation process, either directly or indirectly. So understanding that they're going to be going through the emotions and how they can navigate that change curve and that as well.
Mm. Yeah, and that's a really interesting point about remembering that they are not only having to lead the process, maybe some of them might be at risk themselves, which is hugely difficult, and they'll be having to let good people go and the impact on them. And sometimes I think that can be overlooked. So it sounds like that positioning that you do with them before the whole process kicks off and things get really busy, that's super important. And having done that, what did you notice about how that helped to set things up for success further down the line when the process actually started?
I guess the biggest things is building that trust and building that trust in the consultation process. Because if it's seen as a tick box exercise and the outcome has already been decided, then that trust is going to be broken, not just with the people that are at risk of redundancy, but also those that are not at risk and are remaining in the organisation. So the first thing is by bringing the human element in, you're building that psychological safety and the trust that people can ask questions, they can come and talk to you, they can tell you how they're feeling, how it's affecting you. And by doing that, what you do is mitigate the chance of any grievances or employment tribunals that might come up later down the line, because you've not built that safe environment that people can have an open discussion with you. Also, by allowing people handling the leaders and whoever's handling the redundancy consultations to have the confidence to be able to direct questions to the right people, to be able to think about the questions that are coming through and to look at alternative suggestions that might be coming up in those meetings. What I've seen is businesses saving money operationally because they might not have known something that could be saved. For example, we're doing this redundancy process because we're cutting costs, but do you know there's all these other opportunities to cut costs as well? And then also looking at alternatives. If you're going with a closed mind and you think to yourself, we know the outcome and we know that we're going to be making 20 roles redundant or whatever, then you are closing off your mind to those alternatives. So by listening to them, you can then actually save people jobs and save the organisation money as well. And then also by building that trust in the process and what's going on, people start to move through the change curve quicker. So they get to acceptance a lot quicker, and also are more productive then and performing better in the workplace, in their roles.
Mm. Yeah, I love what you said there about trust being that theme that kind of holds everything together and encourages people to open up. And ultimately, that active listening that's important in individual consultation meetings, so people feel that they're seen and they're heard and they're valued. And as you say, the whole point of consultation is to avoid redundancies, but ultimately that active listening on a one-to-one basis, but also, as you say, in the collective meetings, and giving people the freedom that they can. And you said that, I love what you said there about psychological safety. It's okay to come up with some ideas. It's okay to come up with suggestions because we really want to hear what you've got to say. That's hugely important in terms of setting the right tone for all of this, from what you've said.
Yeah, and also you get to save the business money, even if, for example, you said if you're closing a site, it's unlikely that you're going to walk out and close the doors on the same day. You're going to need to look at things like retention bonuses and keeping people engaged for a period of time. By building that trust and that safety and helping them go through the change curve, I've actually seen organizations be able to not have to pay such big retention bonuses. I've seen organizations be able to give people the opportunity to go and get another job without having to wait to the end of their redundancy consultation process, hence saving the organization redundancy payout money. And I've seen the businesses saving money by people going, actually, I was going to retire anyway. I was going to leave anyway, and feeling safe enough to come up with their thoughts that might save other people their roles as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, as you say, creating that opportunity in that environment where people can openly share. And I love what you said there about, even with a site closure, there'll be things along the way that whilst you might not be able to mitigate the fact that the site's closing and X number of roles are going, but in having that open discussion, that open dialogue, there might be things along the way that you can work together on in terms of how things work and how ultimately those roles are eventually made redundant. So in terms of supporting line managers who are themselves at risk, I always think this is a tricky one because you're asking a lot of a line manager who's at risk of redundancy and you're asking them to go through the process. And I've supported individuals throughout placement support that have been in that situation and understandably they've found it very difficult. What would your advice and guidance be to other HR professionals is how to best support line managers in that sort of situation?
I would say treat them as individuals. They're like you say, they're taking on a lot, and listen to them, support them with what they need through that. There's different people will deal with it in different ways. So yes, you might have your group schemes like your occupational health provider or resources for people to go to, but by talking to the individuals, you're supporting them along the way and adapting what they need. That it might be coaching, it might be outplacement support, it might be help looking at what their next job might look like. Different managers will have different needs. They'll also be in different places in terms of their experience of managing these sorts of situations, how confident they are, how stressful it might be for them, checking in on their well-being as well as how the process is going. And really just going back to what was said before, really remembering that they're human too and they're going through emotions too. But also reiterating that their job as a leader is to lead this process. The support is there for them, but when they're having consultation meetings with their team or any discussions with their team, it's about that person. It's not about them. The about them bit is a different space, and creating that space for them to have that it's about me space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because in those meetings, and I've supported line managers in similar situations, that kind of we're in it together. So I'm at risk as well. And when you're talking to the individual, some might say that helps to create that connection and offer that kind of empathy because they're in that notion of we're in the same boat but different storms. And I like that phrase because everyone's situation is different. So there's that side of it, but then there's, as you say, the other side that says, but this isn't about you, it's about the individual. I'm just wondering, really, I've seen it done where a line manager has been able to say, it's a difficult time for both of us kind of thing, and we're both navigating this. I'm here to support you. And then they move into the leadership role, obviously, because that's where they should be. But then not acknowledging the fact that they're at risk. That's an interesting one as well, isn't it? Because they're completely removing themselves from that and just being objective, and it's all about the individual. So I don't know, is there a right or a wrong way? I'm just thinking about that.
Yeah, interesting point. I think it's all to do with relationships and, again, treating individuals as individuals. I think it's what's your relationship with that person? How have you been normally, and keeping that authentic leadership style that you have. So if you're normally very open about your personal life or something, then it probably feels quite a natural space to talk about it. But if you normally have that work-life balance split and things, then it would feel a bit, oh, actually, woe be me, rather than this is about you. But I think that, yeah, recognize that it's about empathy, not sympathy, isn't it? And it's recognizing that what they're going through is difficult, but not bringing in the sympathy where you go, oh, it's really tough because I'm having to deal with it myself. And I really understand what you're going through. You don't know what they're going through because that's an individual person with individual circumstances. So you're there to support them. And then if that team member wants to open up about a discussion about how you're navigating it and what you're going through, then you put on your mentor hat and you switch into a different leadership style. So I think it's about leading authentically, having the relationship at mind, but recognizing that it isn't about you, this conversation. It is about that individual, their circumstances, what they're going through, and how you can help them navigate this process the best possible way for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said there about empathy, not sympathy, because that can be the tendency in some situations for people to jump into that. And that's just, sympathy. And I've done a separate episode on this, but sympathy comes from a place of well-meaning. It's always meant well, isn't it? But actually, it's not what people need or want in that situation. That piece around, what's your normal relationship with the individual? What's your leadership style like? And treading that line and figuring that out. I think that's, really useful and good advice. So if you were going into collective consultation again, or you were advising a HR professional who's about to do it for the first time, what would be some of the kind of key things that you would advise them to do? Some top tips around reflecting on your experience.
Be prepared, have a really robust plan, but have agility in that as to it might move, it might flex. Communicate even when you don't have anything to communicate about. Make sure that you're remembering that you've got humans on the end of this process, that your managers are well versed in that process, but also in how to handle the emotional side of things. Look after your managers. If you're HR and you're leading this, make sure someone's looking after you as well, and that you're not taking on that whole burden, and navigate these complex situations. I've got through to the end of the collective consultation process before, sometimes early, where we've reached agreement that nothing else can be done. And people have come up and said thank you and shook my hand because they're remembering that great experience in a bad situation and leaving with good memories of the employer that they had, rather than negative emotions, which we all know can sometimes result in a ET1 landing on your desk as well.
I love those insights there, Niki. Thank you so much for sharing those. And thank you for sharing some of those themes and those practical suggestions for people when they're managing redundancies, especially collective consultation. As you say, it can be a more complicated process. And as you say, when you're managing those situations, you are creating the lasting impressions that those individuals will have of an organisation. And how lovely to hear that someone came up and shook your hand as a result of that. And I know lots of other HR professionals, I've heard from them as well, who have said that similarly, they've got through the end of a process and in a difficult situation, they've had someone supporting them and their line manager to create a lasting impression that can be as positive as something can be in a difficult situation like that. And that's a huge responsibility, I think, that HR professionals and leaders undertake when they're managing redundancies. So thank you for sharing those insights. And so where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Thank you. So the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. So you'll find me under Niki Corbishley, which is Niki. My business is called New Coaching, NOO. I'm Niki New, so it's New Coaching. And I specialise in helping senior HR professionals who are at career crossroads. They can find me through my website as well at www.newcoaching.com. And I'm launching a new group coaching program actually in the new year called The New Way. And that's really about bringing people in a safe space, in a community together, and I help them to find their new way forward and rebuild clarity and confidence.
I love the sound of that program, Niki, and particularly with all your experience in HR. It sounds like you're a perfect person to lead people through all of that. So thank you so much for talking to me today. I've really enjoyed today's episode, and I hope the listeners have too. And best of luck with the program and New Coaching.
Thank you. Thank you. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Redundancy Matters podcast. I hope you found today's episode helpful. It would mean a lot to me if you would follow, rate and review this podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, as this helps it reach more people who are managing redundancies. Let me know what you thought, and if you have ideas for future episodes, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on LinkedIn, June Hogan, and get in touch via my website, wildwoodcoaching.co.uk, where you'll also find more resources to help you manage redundancies. I hope you'll join me again soon for the next episode of Redundancy Matters.